Good morning. Today, my private member's bill regarding the creation of a framework to address the crypto asset sector is being read in the House of Commons. This marks the first time crypto assets will be debated in the House, even though 14 years have passed since the Satoshi Nakamoto white paper on blockchain was released. Since then, the crypto asset sector has exploded into a multi-billion-dollar industry with massive year-over-year growth projected in coming years. This discussion is long overdue. Change isn't coming, it's already here, and the federal government has a convening role to play. Canada should be attracting billions of dollars of investment in the fast-growing crypto asset industry. However, we've seen Canada lose crypto asset talent, innovators, and businesses to other leading jurisdictions like the European Union and the United States. Canada should also be providing clear guidance to innovators in the community who are asking for clarity on measures to protect them as they work, given scandals like Quadriga CX. Right now, we're seeing government officials and politicians start to discuss and set policy related to crypto assets. At the same time, many officials and politicians aren't familiar with what crypto assets are or how they function. Rather than prescribing any particular policy, my bill creates a mechanism to formally engage the expertise of crypto asset talent in policy development. This effort is the first of its kind in Canada, and as I've said, is overdue. Other jurisdictions are already ahead of Canada in this regard. For example, the European Union has recently introduced their proposal for a new EU law on crypto assets under the Markets in Financial Instruments Directive. The European Blockchain Partnership is also planning a pan-European regulatory sandbox in cooperation with the European Commission for Data Portability, business-to-business data spaces, smart contracts, and digital identity. This will cover sectors including health, environment, mobility, energy, and more. And last month, American President Joe Biden signed an executive order directing his federal government to come up with a cryptocurrency plan. This order will coordinate efforts among financial regulators to better understand the risks and opportunities presented by digital assets, particularly in the areas of consumer protection, national security, and illicit finance. The Biden administration stated that this is in response to the explosive growth in digital assets and a desire to maintain American technological leadership. The results could shape the contours of a rapidly innovating industry in one of Canada's major trading partners, but yet Canada has not moved forward in this regard. Here in Canada, much policy in this space does fall within provincial jurisdiction, which is already resulting in a patchwork of rules. The federal government should be using its convening power to develop frameworks which provincial governments could ostensibly opt into as a way of respecting provincial jurisdiction and harmonizing the operating parameters of the industry. I believe that the only way for Canada to get this right is to begin with a nonpartisan, non-prescriptive approach that engages innovators in developing policy while respecting provincial jurisdiction. And I believe that this can be done. I'm calling on the federal government today to support the growth of the crypto asset industry and protect those working in the space by having a strategy in this week's federal budget. An easy way for the government to do this would be by signaling support for my private member's bill, which focuses on developing a framework with crypto asset innovators who would be the leading voices in the policy development. The bill's concept is designed to build consensus across partisan lines and has been well received by crypto asset innovators in Canada, as well as by those who desire more safeguards to protect those working in the space. Crypto asset policy should focus on lowering barriers to entry in the sector while simultaneously protecting those working in the space, while minimizing the administrative burden and promoting innovation. These things will only happen if crypto asset innovators are driving policy and have a framework to encourage growth and investment. That's what we need to do to move forward, and today I'm calling upon the federal government to do so. Thank you.
We'll now start the question period. Nous allons maintenant commencer la période de questions. As usual, one question, one follow-up. We'll start with the question in the room, then moving on to Zoom. I invite the people on Zoom to use the raise hand function. Please go ahead.
Hi, thanks for your time. Good morning. Stephanie with the Canadian Press. Policy-wise, what do you think of the assertion that investing or getting involved in cryptocurrency can somehow help with dealing with inflation or opting out of inflation. What do you make of that?
I mean, it really depends on what the context of the assumption is leading into that, right? So there are jurisdictions, there is a jurisdiction that has started to use or adopt a certain type of cryptocurrency as legal tender. That's El Salvador. During that process, if you read the background on it, there's a lot of concern about particularly lower income persons being paid in a currency that's subject to massive volatility on a day-to-day basis, right? Which in turn could have a very negative effect on inflation. So, I think, in my remarks today and in consultation with innovators in the crypto asset space, Canada's banking sector, government officials, people at provincial levels, there's consensus that we need to start with a discussion that engages all of these partners in a nonpartisan, non-rhetoric driven way so that we can get the policy right. I think that over the last couple of months, a lot of Canadians' first exposure to crypto asset currency happened when they were exposed to the trucker convoy and some of the measures around the Emergencies Act. And what I worry about is that the crypto asset industry itself is starting to become a politically charged or politically polarized industry, as opposed to us taking a step back and saying, look, when we're talking about ways to diversify the Canadian economy, to attract talent, this is an industry that is already growing and changing. It's not going away. Saying, how can we encourage growth while promoting safeguards? That, to me, is the right approach to take. It's almost like a phase zero approach. I certainly hope that the discussion doesn't get out of the gate and become overly polarized to the point where, as many innovators are worried about, that this becomes a detriment to Canada being a safe haven for growth.
Do you think there needs to be more safeguards against consumers in the crypto space? You talked about those who are working in it, but those who are putting their money into it. And I mean, you referenced one scandal. There's also questions about what the heck happened with everyone who got into crypto involved in the convoy and where the money went. So is there some concern that this is a volatile industry and there are people putting tons of money into this, and does there need to be more safeguards for them?
This is exactly why I think we need to have innovators who are working in the space help inform legislators and public servants. Frankly, in my discussions over the last couple of years with people, a lot of people don't actually understand what crypto assets are. And frankly, even regulators in Canada are divided on what kind of asset class to treat them as, right? Without having that conversation, it's very difficult to move forward. And that's why I'm hoping that this bill can receive cross-partisan support, or the concept can receive cross-partisan support, so that that type of a discussion can be had with experts around the table. What I worry about, and what I've seen since the incident that you described, is that we have this sort of rigid polarization where I'm classifying it as, crypto is the devil, it's terrible, it's going to ruin your life, to crypto is the savior, it's going to liberate all things. And I just think that that's really oversimplified. That's not how the world works. But I think innovators should be driving that. I have heard from a lot of people who are innovating in the space and consumers that they want this discussion to happen, that discussion happening as it is in other parts of the world, European Union, the UK, the United States, that's actually healthy for the Canadian economy. I just, what I would hope, and my plea to colleagues of all political stripe, is that rather than us embarking on, that type of a polarized discussion, that we are looking at a common sense way to move forward that actually makes sense, and that we resist the urge to sort of come up with these very rote, polarized positions that benefit no one.
We'll now move on to the question on Zoom. Once again, I invite everybody on Zoom who has a question to use the raise hand option. Hélène Buzetti.
Yeah. Hi, Ms. Rempel. Bear with me. I just read very quickly your bill. But if I understand correctly, you're just proposing to have a conversation to establish a framework. But I'd like to hear from you more specifically, what areas do you think are in urgent need of regulation? What are the areas we should regulate and in what for what objective. Can you be more specific about that, please?
For sure. And I should explain very quickly what the bill does. So the bill calls upon the Minister of Finance to create a framework regarding growth of the crypto asset sector. And by doing so, requires the minister to consult provincial governments, asking for innovators in each of the provincial jurisdictions in order to help inform this policy. It also requires this framework to go through committees in both the House and the Senate for input, and would be non-binding on the provinces essentially, but could be used as a way of opt-in to harmonize regulations. You asked about what specific areas the framework should address. I have very cleverly left that very open-ended, because when I started looking at the prescriptive elements which could be contained in the framework, I didn't get a lot of consensus on that, which is why I actually think this process of having innovators, people who are working in the space, consumers, it would also be open to the public for submission to help define that, I think is a more productive approach. I think if I had put, and I know if I had put a bill on the floor of the House of Commons as the first foray into this with prescriptive policy without having that discussion, it would have just been, I think it would have made the partisan discussion worse. I know that for a fact. But what I'm hoping is that this bill can at least get to committee stage, and that the Finance Committee in the House of Commons can be seized with the question that you just asked. The Finance Committee has had different representatives appear before it under different studies, raise some of these issues. I think that my colleagues on the Finance Committee could actually have that conversation when they're reading this bill, should it get to that stage, and amend the bill as they see fit. So I guess what I'm trying to say is I want to do something that actually resembles work with a private member's bill. I know it's a rare thing in Ottawa, but I'm hoping that this becomes a collaborative partisan exercise rather than, just a stake in the ground that moves forward. Very briefly, I'll close with this. As an Albertan, I've watched the energy sector itself, like the actual industry of the oil sands and beyond, become a polarizing industry. And rather than talking about nuanced public policy around its use, its growth, the importance to the Canadian economy, and all political stripes are guilty of this, I've watched it become a polarizing industry in and of itself. I really hope that doesn't happen with the crypto asset sector in Canada. And I hope that this bill pulls us off the precipice and incents parliamentarians to work together towards a common good. So hope springs eternal, and we'll see what happens.
And as a follow-up, so correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm not very familiar with that sector, but as of now, there are no such regulations at all in Canada. And correct me if I'm wrong, but that's the assumption under which I work. And therefore, I wanted to ask you what you made of Mr. Poliev's statement, I believe, last Thursday, when he said, if I become prime minister, there will be no China approach to cryptocurrency to, limit that industry. I wanted to hear your comments about that. Thank you.
I think your question about content and your admission of, admittedly, this is a sector I don't know much about. It's where a lot of Canadians are, and it's actually exciting to see media engage in this topic. And again, I think it speaks to the importance of this bill and the approach that this bill proposes. I think it's going to educate all of us. I certainly hope it's adopted for that reason. With regard to your question about my colleague, I think I've spoken to that at length in a previous answer to a previous question.
Next question, Catherine Lévesque.
Yes, good morning. So I was wondering if you had any discussions with other parties and even your own party, and do you have any sense of the support that you might get from your own party and the other parties in the House?
The bill was designed in a collaborative fashion. I have reached out to all of, to many people, both in my own party and within every other political party as well, too, to try and get consensus. I've also been very clear that as the mover of the bill, I'm very open to amendment of it. I actually hope that this becomes a bill that is debated, that's dissected, that smart amendments are thought about and considered, which is something that has not happened a lot in the House of Commons over recent years. But I'm cautiously optimistic. But the reason why I'm here today, too, is to say, like, look, if the federal government wants to steal the approach and essentially talk about it in the budget, I think that that's progress, too. I'm just very worried, partisan hat off, as a legislator, that we are so far behind other jurisdictions and that this is now becoming again, like we're seeing this start to polarize as an issue. I tabled my private members bill just before the issue with the Emergencies Act came to be. And I think a lot of people ask me, like, oh, was that a coincidence or conspiracy? This is something that I've been working on for a couple of years now. But I think that incident also underscores the need for this approach. So in that context, I think that there has been a lot of positive reception from other parties, from my own party, particularly around, like, this is sort of neutral in its wording, and that it promotes a collaborative approach. Collaborative approaches are, they're a dying thing in politics these days, but I certainly hope that the bill is received in that regard, and that the federal government, any approach that they take to this sector, isn't done behind closed doors, but it's done in the public. It's done with industry who are experts providing the input in it, and that the provincial governments are also involved.
And I also want to go back to, obviously, cryptocurrency has become, it seems, an issue in this current leadership race because your colleague, Pierre Poliev, has been talking about it at length. He's also proposing a national framework and working with provinces to kind of establish that. So I was kind of wondering, double barrel question, how is your bill different from what Mr. Poliev is proposing in this race? And are you also hoping that Patrick Brown, which you're supporting, is also championing your bill in cryptocurrency in general?
Well, that's the thing with women, right? We put all the good ideas forward and the guys get the credit.
But was that the answer? Sorry.
Yes, it was, with your disembodied voice over Zoom. So,
is there any other question in the room? This concludes the press conference then. Thank you.